Greetings, you mighty champion. I'm Pastor Glenn, and I'm going to share with you an amazing truth from the Bible that's basically been forgotten about in the body of Christ. I'm going to be teaching you about what the Bible calls the blessing. Proverbs 10:22 says, "The blessing of the Lord, the blessing makes you rich, and God adds no sorrow with it." I want to tell you a story that I read several years ago. On July 29th, 1967, after being deployed off the coast of Vietnam for only 4 or 5 days, an accident occurred on board of the U.S. Aircraft carrier, the USS Forrestal. A Zuni rocket was somehow accidentally launched on the flight deck from an F-4 Phantom jet. It was parked on the starboard side of the nearly 4-acre flight deck. And this rocket streaked across the flight deck and struck what was called a Skyhawk, another fighter bomber, in the fuel tank and spread fiery jet fuel under another 21 fully loaded, fully armed with bombs, bomb-laden, I guess I could say, warplanes waiting for their turn to be launched from the flight deck. The ignition started a fire that was amazing. The jets were ready to take off, and it caused other rockets full of napalm and bombs to cook off and ignite, and it created massive explosions on this aircraft carrier. And the ensuing fire and explosions of 9,000-pound bombs, which was big in those days, created huge holes in the flight deck going down a few I'm going to say stories, okay? And so it tore gaping holes in the bowels of the ship and several decks below. The decks below the flight deck was a hangar where there were additional warplanes and where they stored rockets and bombs and ammunition and jet fuel that they brought up on elevators. Well, those things started to explode below deck. And so many sailors died on the flight deck, and many died from the explosions in the bowels of the ship. Other soldiers, or sailors I should say, that remained alive, they were trying to escape the flames, and still others were valiantly trying to save their buddies and friends that were wounded or injured down below. There were only 8 trained firefighters aboard the aircraft carrier. And all 8 at that time happened to be on the flight deck during the accident. The fire captain and 4 other firefighters were killed instantly. The rest were injured so seriously that they couldn't fight the fire. So here's the thing. The untrained crew was left to fight the fires. They valiantly started to pump ocean water, millions of gallons, and foam onto the flight deck to knock down the flames and prevent more explosions. The crews below, they loaded, they had tractors and tugs that they put on, and forklifts, and they put on the elevators and brought them up and started shoving aircraft, helicopters and fighter jets and bombers off the deck so that there wouldn't be more explosions, right? And so they pushed multi-million-dollar airplanes off the deck to avoid more explosions. Men rolled by hand 250-pound and 500-pound bombs off the deck into the ocean, along with the aircraft, to keep them from exploding on the deck. Now, here's where the law of fire science was violated. And it's important for you to know that maybe you and I are violating spiritual laws and natural laws of success that are keeping us from being totally blessed. So let's find out what happened. The law of fire science was violated in that you can't put out a jet fuel fire with water. It requires that you use foam to smother the flames and seal out the oxygen and air. And by putting the water on there, it floated the foam off the deck and down below and didn't put out the fire. It actually washed more jet fuel down into the bowels of the ship. jet fuel floats on water. Jet fuel floating on water was washed into the huge craters and poured jet fuel and fire down below where more explosions took place. The high explosives below started to ignite and burn jet fuel and cause explosions that went many, many stories below deck. So the firefighters, in their Herculean effort to save the Forrestal and their friends, after agonizing hours, and with the help of numerous other ships that came to pour water on the deck and foam on the deck and stuff like that, finally got the fire contained. After the fire was out, the captain ordered the fatigued survivors to go down below and bring up the dead. They were going to give them burial at sea. Some of them were so badly charred, they looked like scarecrows. The men cried as they explained this story on the History Channel, because a lot of times they had to break off the arms and legs of their friends to get them through the rubble, to get them up on the top deck. Here's the real bummer. Although well-trained, or well-meaning, I guess I should say, the untrained fire crew, the sailors, in their desperate, noble attempt to save the ship and their fellow crewmates, actually contributed to the death of their friends and their crewmates by not understanding the law of fire science. 134 men perished. Hundreds and hundreds were seriously burned and injured. The USS Forrestal nearly sank. It didn't sink, though. The cost to repair it in 1967 was $72 million, which in today's economy would equal way more than $500 million. Other than the original 8 firefighters, the core believer of every sailor on the USS Forrestal, like our core belief would have probably been, was, hey, there's a fire, put water on it, right? From the time they were little kids, they saw firefighters on TV hosing down fires with water, and that became their paradigm. Something catches on fire, add water. Now, how does that relate to you and I? In your personal life, in my personal life, there may be many areas that we would swear to God that we're thinking right, believing right, living right, speaking right, loving other people right, our relationship with God is going just right, and that we're doing the right thing. However, we could be mistaken in some areas. Most of us have innocently been using the wrong information, the wrong principles, the wrong formulas, the wrong beliefs and paradigms to get ahead in Christianity. But instead of benefiting us by using that wrong information and formula and believing, we've had devastated lives. The blessing of the Lord is what you're going to be learning about. It makes you rich, and He adds no sorrow with it. So we're going to learn about the blessing that's on our life, how to activate it. I'm Pastor Glenn. Please study these lessons carefully with me. I'm going to share with you about the blessing of God that the Septuagint says is on the head of the righteous. That's you. You've got the blessing, and all the other blessings that God gives us springs out of the blessing that's within us. That's pretty amazing. Listen, please like and subscribe below. Use your faith. Keep a good attitude. Make a great day.